Hello friends, today on the Flanagan Homestead we are going to quickly discuss cutting, splitting, stacking, and curing firewood. I'm right on the edge of my driveway where we park. I've got several good firs in here, and I've got this one alder that's really weak. It's dying out on the top. It doesn't belong in here. It's got a big lean, so I'm going to take this down, drop it in the yard, turn it into firewood, and we'll talk a little bit firewood. I love my carbide tip chain. Paid a lot for it. The guys down at Woodland Saw and Cycle convinced me to get a carbide tip chain when I was cutting Christmas trees, because you're always going through dirt and everything and doling up your saw chain. 5 days of cutting Christmas trees, molehills and everything in the way. Never sharpened it once. Still cutting out nice flakes. Good chain. It was expensive, but it was worth it. If you've got both ends of the log holding pressure with it spanning in between and wants to come down and pinch your saw, you can cut the length of the rounds you want, several of them about halfway through on the top of the log, and that way when it falls to the ground it'll be easier to cut through. And then after about 4 or 5 rounds up, you can cut all the way through, obviously cutting halfway down through the top and then coming up from the bottom, so that your saw does not get pinched in there. Okay, I highly recommend that you have some falling wedges, even if you're not going to be falling trees like I did today. They're really valuable. You probably saw me when I was cutting that tree up on the slope, and there's a lot, it was spanning a lot of ground. If you cut from the top, that's going to try to pivot down and pin your bar in there. So knowing that, you know, obviously I made some cuts from the bottom so it dropped through. But I can tell you, living on a hillside, there's many a day I've been out here cutting, and I think I know that it's going to drop this way, or might be branches coming up and creating a reverse leverage or a side leverage, and you just don't always know. And so if you have falling wedges, as you're cutting through, you can slam those in behind the bar of the saw, and then if it wants to pinch down, it'll keep the tree from pinching back together so you can continue to move your bar freely. I have spent many a day where I didn't do this, and I thought, oh, I know which way the tree is leveraging, and so I cut in and it pinches my bar. I don't have another saw to free it up, and I'm yanking and yanking as hard as I can. I'm getting other branches, trying to create leverage to lift the tree up and free the leverage, and with my other hand pull the saw out, and it's really frustrating. I have done that so many times over the last 30 years. So it's good to have falling wedges even if you're not falling trees. The nice plastic ones, you could stick them in there. If you're pivoting the saw when you're falling a tree or whatnot and you happen to hit them, it'll just cut through them. It won't ruin your chain. I may have done that a time or two. But they're a good thing to have with you when you're cutting, even trees laying on the ground. Protect your bar from getting pinched. and stuck inside a big log. Okay, I've heard a lot of talk about what's the best way to split your rounds. I've seen people put bungee cords around it while it's standing up and hitting it so they don't have to stand it up over and over again. I've seen people put in a tire. Those are good ideas, but I like to just leave my trees laying in a line on the ground like these are. These are good, thick alders, but I like them to stay in a line, and so I start at one end and I use leverage and just whack them when they're down. I love my Fiskars splitting axe. It's wider than an axe, but not super wide. It has a sharp angle, so it pops things out, but it's not super light. I can swing it aggressively, and I use the leverage, the tree behind it, to split it open and just work your way down the tree. This tree was up on the hill, and I had to pull it down in pieces so I don't have the long row, but I love it when I can lay it flat on the ground and just start at one end and just split my way down, just bumping up against itself. Position your feet so they're not behind where the log is, and the axe could kick out to the side and get your leg. You don't want that. Position yourself further forward, but then you could just get after it while it's on the ground. Okay, if you want to make sure your wood is dry the following winter, you stack it in a single row so that the ends are out to the southern exposure. The sun's going to hit them. This wood is going to be plenty dry. Also, you can see my stack is going straight up right here. I don't have a stick or anything. Many of you know this, but you can log cabin style it. I'm just stacking most of the stack in rows. Obviously, it will slope down, but if you stack log cabin style two this way, you can get the end to stand pretty straight upright, and then you don't have to have your pile get out in the way of everything else. So I have stairs coming down right behind me that I don't want blocked. So you need to find straighter pieces of wood like these in similar height so that they stack and they won't rock back and forth. But then you can create a log cabin that the rest of your wood could stack up against and it won't fall over. So I have a straight edge right here, leaving the steps open. Obviously you don't want to use pieces like this for it. That would never make a good support. But then you could just start throwing wood in up against that. Obviously you don't want to go too terribly high with a stack like this. I usually don't go more than 4 feet high with the log cabin stack. 3.5 is about what I normally like to do, but then that keeps a nice clean edge so your stack does not just sprawl all over the entire yard. When cutting firewood, make sure you know what dimensions you want. I have typically done 16-inch lengths. My wife is asking for a little bit shorter so that she could put wood into the stove back to back as well as side to side. A lot of people have different ways of measuring so they're consistent. After I've cut firewood for a number of years, I don't feel like I have a problem being within an inch of 16 inches. But I'm going to start learning to cut it 14 inches to keep my wife happy. Well, here we are. The yard's all cleaned back up. We've got about 1/3 of the cord stacked over here. Please join me for more Flanagan Homestead stuff where Christmas trees are my business, teaching, including horticulture, is my job, and outdoor projects are my passion.